Welcome to St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Parish, the beginning. St. Agnes and IC parishioners and Father Silbauer, pastor of St. Agnes, convinced Bishop Bernard Law, now Cardinal Law, and Father Tom Reedy that a new parish should be created in the southwest part of Springfield. So he went out to start a new parish. We first gathered at the Carmelite Monastery, now the Lighthouse for Pregnant Girls, for the Saturday evening Mass. And later we gathered at Skateland, now the Chevrolet dealership on South Campbell. We would put out our plastic sheeting to protect the flooring, set up the chairs, and roll out the altar. People would say that we were holy rollers, but we worked together and formed a strong parish. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Church original building. In 1982, the parish built the original building, which was the old gym, the conference room, kitchen, bathrooms, and 6 classrooms. We had a parishioner who made us wooden kneelers to keep the row of chairs straight, but had no padding. We worked together to set up and take down for all the different events. But we worked hard to make the gym into a liturgical space, similar to what we do at Christmas and Easter for the overflow seating. The church. In 1989, Bishop John Liebrecht gave the group of 18 people a book to study, Environment and Art for Catholic Worship. This book gave liturgical guidelines for the construction and the celebration of a liturgical space. The book has been replaced by Built of Living Stones, Art, Architecture, and Worship, written by the National Conference of Catholic Bishops. Brother William Woger from Omaha, Nebraska, was hired as the liturgical consultant, and Father Paul McLaughlin, head of the Office of Worship, worked with the committee in planning of the church. The house of God's people faces east, as most churches try to do, to remind us of the rising sun. The bishop asked that we not have crosses plastered all over the exterior of the building. He said that the structure should be prominent so that the people came over the hill from any direction. They would recognize this structure as a special building, a house of God's people. The building does have 1 cross on the exterior, and I will show you that as we move further into the church. The church has steps that approach the building, and there is specific reason for that. In the book of Genesis, Jacob went on a journey, and he became tired, so he took a stone and placed it underneath his head. That became the cornerstone, and he laid down to sleep. During his sleep, he had a dream that there was a ladder going from ground up to heaven, and there were people in white robes going up the ladder and coming back down. These people were climbing the ladder to get nourished by the Lord and coming back down to fulfill their task. The words of that beautiful black spiritual say it so well. We are climbing Jacob's ladder, soldiers of the Lord. So we climb those steps into the house of God's people to be nourished by His Word and His Eucharistic meal. And then we are sent back out into the world to be His arms and to do His work. You will see that the granite octagon on the step, the granite matches the baptismal font and the feet of the altar and the AMBO. The shape matches the shape of the baptismal font. It is on that location that the Easter fire is lit on Holy Saturday. The Paschal candle is lit, and we all are led into the dark church with the light of Christ. When everyone is seated in their pew, the light is spread from the Paschal candle to all the people, and it is a beautiful sight. I encourage you to come and experience the night of all nights, the Easter Vigil. The gathering area. When you reach the building, you come into the gathering area where we meet and greet each other. How are you? What is new in your life? How is everyone doing? We become one body of God's people. The hospitality table. We are greeted by the hospitality table. This table holds the gifts of bread and wine that are presented to the priest at the altar during the offertory procession. The gifts of bread and wine represent all the labors that we each do every day. Think about what it takes to make the bread. The planting of the wheat, the gathering it in, the thrashing, the grinding, the mixing, the baking. Think about what it takes to make the wine. The tending of the vines, the watching, the picking, the smashing into juice, the waiting. This table also holds the environment for the liturgical season of Advent, Lent, Christmas, Easter. Nothing else should ever be placed on this table. Cry area. Area to the right is the cry area. A wonderful liturgical consultant and architect, Ada Bethune, suggested that we not build a cry room, as it was found that as our children grew up, they never felt welcome in our churches. They were always told, "You make too much noise, so go to the cry room. She said, make an open space so that as children become disruptive, they can be brought out here. But then as they return to the church proper, then they are quieted down. Our children are welcome into the house of God's people from the moment that they are born. The processional cross. Above the doors, you will see this large processional cross. Father Mike McDevitt and the committee met with the iron craftsmen from Bass Pro, who made the processional crosses and the candles that are in the sanctuary. Father Mike was correct that we needed a larger processional cross because the size of our space, but we could not convince him that the one he wanted was going to be too big to carry. So the day before the dedication, December the 1st, 1991, it took 3 men to get it out of the back of the pickup truck. A man my size was the president of the parish council, and it was his job to carry the processional cross during the dedication. We all held our breath that with every step he took, it would not come crashing down on someone's head. Father Mike and I agreed that the perfect place for the large processional cross was above the main door to remind us that Christ is always there to help us carry our crosses. We know that we were not able to help Christ carry his cross, but we are thankful that he is always with us. A smaller processional cross was made, but it is still quite heavy. The main doors. The main doors, note their size. The small doors on each side are there to follow the codes for emergency exit. These doors are oversized because they represent Christ's arms. Think of all the churches of Rome. Their main doors huge and are covered with brass and symbols. Those doors are open as you arrive at church. Christ is saying, welcome, come into my house and let me feed you. I would challenge you to stand by the entryway for just a second or two and turn around and greet the next person that walks towards the doors. You will set their heart on fire as well as your own when you smile and welcome. So don't walk through those side doors. Walk through Christ's arms and feel welcomed and loved. Those doors go closed as the priest, Christ's representative, prepares to follow the cross in service to the sanctuary. Those doors stay closed until the end of Mass, and as the servers and priests prepare to leave, then the doors are pushed open, symbolizing that Christ is sending us forth to do his work and be his hands. The baptismal font. We are greeted by the baptismal font as we move through the doors. That is done on purpose, to remind us that it is through these waters of baptism that we become a member of this community. The font is permanent. The font is made of granite. It allows for immersion at the Easter Vigil. All those of age are welcome into the font, or the baptism of babies by the raised section. The font goes below the floor level. The font is a symbol of a tomb and a womb. We die to our old self and are welcomed like a new baby springing forth from the womb at birth. It is such a special moment at the Easter Vigil that we have a video camera showing the baptisms on the wall. It is so beautiful to see the people when they experience this sacrament. They have waited so long to be washed by the waters of baptism. They smile and some cry as the priest pours the water over their heads with a large pitcher. They are wrapped in the white garment, a large towel, and are sent out to change and come back to be greeted and welcomed by the gathering assembly. Some families are all baptized together in the font, and that is wonderful. By the way, the waters are heated. The font is in the shape of an octagon to remind us that God's love does not stop on the seventh day, but his love is ever ongoing. The Paschal Candle. The Paschal Candle is located here by the font because at baptism we are given his light. The Paschal Candle is placed behind the AMBO during the entire Easter season. The Paschal Candle is placed at the head of the casket or by the urn as ashes at a funeral and is removed during the season of Lent. All other times it is there to remind us that Christ is our light. The Ambry. The Ambry is located on the wall by the font, as this is where the oils are used the most. The Catholic Church has 3 oils that are used in our sacraments. These oils are blessed at the Chrism Mass each Holy Week. The Chrism Mass is where the priest renews his vows and dedication, and the oils are blessed and sent out to each parish. We have the oil of the sick, the oil of the catechumens, and the oil of the chrism. Any priest can bless the oil of the sick and the oil of the catechumens in an emergency, but the bishop is the only one that can bless the oil of chrism. Anytime you are struggling with a serious illness or preparing for surgery, ask the priest for the special blessing with the oil of the sick. It is the oils of prayer and healing. Your hands will be anointed. Anytime you are anointed with any of the blessed oil, you massage the oils in and you never wipe them off. Another thing to be aware of is that as these oils are replaced, they are either burned or poured back into the ground. Anything that has been blessed, like holy water, water for washing the liturgical linens, has to be poured back into the ground or burned. The oil of catechumens is the oil used during baptism and the anointing of those in the RCIA who have not been baptized. It is believed to strengthen the one being baptized to turn away from evil, temptation, and sin. The third oil, the oil of chrism, is used during the sacraments of baptism, confirmation, and ordination of priest, and the dedication of liturgical spaces. When a man becomes a priest, the oil of chrism is poured on his hands. When a priest becomes a bishop, the oil of chrism is poured on his head. The Reconciliation Chapel. The Chapel of Reconciliation is located next to the font, so that after we receive the absolution, we are reminded to wash ourselves with the water of baptism and reminded that we are part of God's family. Once again, the large door represents God, and He welcomes you to come in and talk. We close the door as a sign to the community that the chapel is in use. The document stated that the chapel should be simple and austere. It should be that people could go face to face or anonymously. It should be decorated with a cross, table, and Bible. The divider was made by the same person that made our original wooden kneelers. This person's brother-in-law was a monk and made the austere cross on the wall as well as the candle holder that sits on the table, reminding us that we all come together around one another. The quilt was the one made by the parish women and hung behind the altar when we used the old gym as our liturgical space. We also realized that there was not sufficient insulation placed in the wall, so we decided it could be a great place to preserve the quilt and also act as a buffer. Movable seating area. Back outside of the Reconciliation Chapel, we have the large movable seating area. This was very well thought out as a place for more seating on special occasions such as Christmas and Easter, when we seat 1,000 people in the church, which normally seats 800. We use this for the Easter Vigil and the candidates and catechumens who are being received into the church. We also use this space for the visitation of a family of our community that has died. It is wonderful for the family and friends to gather here in God's house to say farewell and then to celebrate the funeral mass. People find peace in the fact that their loved one is resting in God's house and under the sanctuary lamp. The stained glass window. The stained glass windows are the next thing that I would like for you to notice. The committee gave the daily thoughts of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton and asked these 3 different artists to give us their interpretation. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton had 2 focuses in her spiritual life: the Eucharist and eternity. You can see in the window the abstract shafts of wheat and bunches of grapes. The artist used the opaque white as a symbol of our soul, nourished by the Eucharist. See the circular symbols, then the shafts of wheat and grapes, and then the opaque white travels through the shades of yellow, blue, green, red, which symbolize all the joys and sorrows that St. Elizabeth Ann Seton and we go through in our lives. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton was an ordinary child. She was from a very affluent family. Her father was a doctor and well known in the community. Her mother died when St. Elizabeth Ann Seton was a very young child at the age of 3. When her father got remarried, he had children by his second wife. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton became very unhappy and unruly, so she was sent to live with other relatives. She was a beautiful, well-educated, talented musician and accomplished horsewoman. She fell head over heels in love with William Seton. William Seton was from a wealthy family who owned a shipping business. They started a family, and then William's health became a problem. The business began failing and eventually went bankrupt. They lived with her father, and for the first time she became aware of children starving. Her father became a victim of the yellow fever epidemic and died. Elizabeth turned more and more to the scriptures. In 1803, William's doctors recommended a sea journey for his health. Elizabeth had to leave some of her children behind with relatives and headed for Italy. But when they got to Italy, they were quarantined because of the epidemic of yellow fever in New York. They suffered for 40 days in a cold, damp stone tower outside the city. Elizabeth had to care for her severely ill husband and keep her daughter Anna Marie amused. She turned more to God and prayer. William died shortly after being released from the tower. While awaiting to return to America, Elizabeth attended the church of her Italian friends, where she was deeply impressed with the Catholic belief in the real presence. Eventually, she became a Catholic and was rejected by her family and friends. She opened a boarding house for boys and began teaching in schools in Baltimore. She became a nun and founded the Sisters of Charity. So all of the colors in the window represent the joys and the sorrows of her life. As the white opaque glass gets near the rose window, in the middle, the white opaque takes the shape of a dove, winging its way to eternity, symbolized by the circle, the abstract crown, and what appears to be a hand pulling her home. The rose window. As you look through the rose window, you will see the form of a cross. This cross appears on the exterior of the building. The two windows are separated by several feet, and we must climb through a tiny opening in the working sacristy to get to that space. The architect had a great idea, but failed to leave enough space to get to the lights and windows for cleaning and repair, so that one day we will have to remove those windows in order to clean and replace fixtures. The windows over the choir area were added many years later, and luckily they were created by the same company with the same type and colors of glass. The labyrinth. As you look out the back windows of the church, you see the labyrinth. That is a meditative walk that faces east. It is made up of 12 circles that take you back and forth, but end up in a circle in the middle. There are many ways to walk the path, but most people will think of one thing that really is troublesome to them going in, and when they reach the middle, stop. Take a deep breath, feel the breath of the Spirit, and just listen and feel. When you are ready to leave the inner circle, think about the positive feelings and solutions. I could share many stories about the answers that I and others have received from walking this path. You can get to the labyrinth from the gate on the west side of the building anytime. There are security lights out there so you can walk it at night. I love to walk it barefoot and feel the warmth of the pavers under my feet. The statues. In the back of the church, we have our statues. In the older churches, you could see the statues in the front of the church. People for years thought that we worship statues, but we use the statues to remind us that we, ordinary people, can become members of the community of saints by the way that we live our lives. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton was certainly an ordinary person. She was a child, wife, mother, nun, but lived her life serving others and spreading God's love. We all know people who we can say are living saints by the way that they live their lives. We have the votive candles under the statue for the people who want to have special needs remembered and prayed for. But I encourage that if you have a special need, that you light a candle at your home or wherever you are to remind you to pray each time you look at the flickering flame. Just be careful with fire and the candles. The Cherub Garden. As you look out the west windows of the church, you will see our Cherub Garden. It is a special place where those who have lost a child can find a place to remember. We have a special Cherub Mass the first Wednesday, October of each year. If you would like to purchase a paper, to be sure to see me afterwards or just ask at the parish office. The worship space. When we met with a liturgical consultant, it was explained that our liturgical spaces are designed with 3 circles in mind. The inner circle is for the altar, AMBO, and chair. The second circle is for the active participants. Note that I said active. This does not mean that we sit and watch. We stand, we sit, we kneel, we respond to the prayers, and we sing. The third circle is the perimeter, and that is where we keep the devotional items like the statues, the labyrinth, the Cherub Gardens, and the Stations of the Cross. The Stations of the Cross refer both to a series of depictions of Christ's journey from the court of Pontius Pilate to the tomb in a short pilgrimage centered around the stations. These 14 stations were seen by Father Fergus Monahan in St. Thomas More Chapel in Florida on his travels. He sent a photo with a note that these might be appropriate for our church. They were sculpted by Deborah Luke from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and resembled the crucifix on the sanctuary wall of the church. Father Tom Reedy presented them to the Parish Council in 2011 and received overwhelming support. Dan and Al Locamp designed the framing and lighting that finished the installation of these beautiful stations. These are things that are done outside of the celebration of the Mass. When we come into our liturgical space here at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, we do not genuflect. We reverence the altar with a bow of our heads. If we had a tabernacle in this space, then we would genuflect on our right knee. But our altar has been blessed with the oil of chrism at the dedication. They poured the oil of chrism all over the top and rubbed it in. They also blessed the walls, and those areas are marked with a cross painted in a near matching paint. It was explained to the original committee that if you are having a big celebration and everyone is gathered to say watch the World Series of baseball or the Super Bowl, that there is no way to have a secret conversation with the person next to you. This is the same in the church. When we are being the active participants at the celebration of the Mass, we cannot and should not be having a secret conversation with God. So the church asks that we take the reserved Eucharist and place it in a special chapel for taking to the homebound and for the private prayer. You will see that the priest reverences the altar with a bow, and the only time the priest genuflects is when the Eucharist is on the altar. Altar and AMBO. I would like for you to notice that the altar table and the AMBO both look like tables. We are nourished at the AMBO with the Word of God. Then the priest reads the Gospel. He crosses his forehead, his lips, and his heart with the cross, and we are encouraged to do also. We are reminding ourselves that God's Word should always be on our mind, on our lips, and in our heart. We all know that it's not an easy thing to do, but with God's help, we can become better at it. So our hearts and minds are set on fire by His words. I remember describing that the committee wanted the light from the window to shine down on the priest reading the Word, and then that lighting shining out on the people. The altar table is another example of nourishment. We're reminded that on the altar, the sacrifice of the cross is offered under sacramental signs, and is also the table of the Lord at which the people of God are called to participate in the Mass. We are nourished at the Eucharistic meal. The bread and the wine become the body and the blood that we eat and drink when we receive the Eucharist. The light shines down on the Eucharistic meal and then out upon us as we are welcomed forth to receive. The crucifix. I would like to point out the crucifix. There was much discussion about where it should be placed and its color. The committee felt that the crucifix was so important, and we wanted its presence and tension to be felt between the Word and the meal. We did not want the crucifix to overpower the space or those two important parts of the celebration. We realized that if not for the crucifixion and the resurrection, we would not be able to share in the heavenly kingdom. So we can feel the presence and the tension between these two forms of nourishment. Nothing is centered in this space except the crucifix on the wall. It is like Christ's presence on the cross is guiding and giving both of these nourishments to us. The sources of light. I would like to point out the verde finish on all of our light sources are the same. The chandelier, the candlesticks, and as we go into the Reservation Chapel, even the sanctuary lamp. Decorations. People often ask why we don't use artificial flowers and candles. Because the church reminds us that what we use in God's house should be real, or it would make what we celebrate artificial also. We are reminded to use the best that we can afford in all things liturgical, and that two questions should be asked of everything that we use. Is it the best quality that we can afford, and is it appropriate for the liturgical action and supports the weight of mystery? People often wonder why we do not put things in front of the altar and the AMBO. The documents explain that nothing should interfere with anyone coming directly to the altar and the AMBO. Nothing should distract us from listening or actively participating in the Eucharist. When we put beautiful flowers in front of or under the altar and the AMBO, we are visually placing a barricade that can distract. The entire worship space is to be decorated and enclose us in that beauty. So that is why we put all the decor behind the altar, AMBO, and round the perimeter. The Advent wreath is constructed of a circle of evergreen branches into which are inserted 4 candles. According to tradition, 3 of the candles are violet and the 4th is rose. The candles represent the 4 weeks of Advent, and the number of candles lighted each week corresponds to the number of the current week of Advent. The Advent wreath is to be of sufficient size to be visible to the congregation. It should not interfere with the celebration of the liturgy, nor should it obscure the altar, lectern, or chair. Our Advent wreath consists of 4 huge candles, each sitting on top of a 6-foot pillar entwined with evergreen. 2 pillars are placed in the sanctuary area of the church, and 2 are placed in the nave. Week after week, each candle was lit. The whole church gradually became the circle of the light of Christ, illuminating the darkness. The members of our parish let our Advent wreath shine. The Credence Table. As we turn the corner here in the church, we see the Credence Table. This holds all the vessels that are needed for the celebration of the Eucharist. The servers are trained and know what vessels to bring out and where they are to be placed and when to do so that the celebration of the Mass is not disruptive. The working sacristy. As we enter the working sacristy, you will see many things: cabinets that hold the wine, the Eucharistic breads, the chalices, gold and pewter, precious metals, pewter at Advent and Lent, the monstrance for the devotions, the linens, the purificators that hold the consecrated blood of Christ. So they are to be soaked, and that water then is to be poured into the ground. They are to be washed and ironed, and we use 90 to 100 a week, so it takes hours to do. There's the Paschal candle holders, the thurible and incense. Catholic churches use it to remind us that our prayers rise like incense. Candles, and also some of the liturgical seasonal decor. The basic liturgical colors: white and gold for Christmas and Easter, green for ordinary time, purple for Advent and Lent, and red for Pentecost and Palm Sunday. The Reservation Chapel. This is a chapel that is specifically for the reserved Eucharist, to be taken to the sick and homebound or for private adoration. When you enter and leave this space, you genuflect on the right knee. The documents say that it should have easy access to the outside as well as to the main space. It is to be an atmosphere of warmth while acknowledging the mystery of the Lord. It should support private meditation without distraction. Any type of iconography should not obscure the primary focus of the reservation. The base should be large enough to allow prostration and other postures. The tabernacle should be on a pillar, giving the feeling of a person's presence in the room. There should be a lamp continuously burning near the tabernacle. This lamp burns continuously except during the Mass on Holy Thursday, and the tabernacle stays empty and the lamp unlit until after Mass on Easter Vigil or Holy Saturday evening. I have seen many people needing to hug the tabernacle, kiss the tabernacle. This is the place where many people come, Catholic and Protestant, to feel closer to God. Remember, we can pray anywhere, but this is a precious jewel, and I hope that you will take the time to experience. The stained glass window. The stained glass window was found by Father Mike McDevitt at an antique shop called Aesthetic Concerns in Center Springfield. The window was taken from an Episcopalian church in England. The church needed a new roof, and the people of the parish, having no money, decided that they would sell their least favorite window to pay for the roof. Father Mike took various committee members to see the window, and it was immediately voted on to purchase, have restored, and placed in our Reservation Chapel. We do know that the window is over 100 years old. We have told that one artist did all the faces, another artist did all the clothes, and another artist did all of the symbols. There are many symbols woven throughout the window. Be sure to genuflect as you enter and leave this space. The statue of Mary. As you leave the Reservation Chapel, be sure to notice the beautiful statue of Mary. When the parish rectory was across from Horace Mann School, Father Mike McDevitt got a knock on his door early one morning. It was a young lady asking if the church would like to have the statue. The lady explained that her mother had died and that no one knew what to do with the statue. The parish was excited to receive this gift, and the architects designed this special niche. We used to have it behind glass, but the light needed to be changed and the glass was accidentally broken, and everyone liked the statue so much better without the glass. The book beneath the statue is where anyone can write a special need for prayers. No need to leave a name, just write what you wish to have remembered in prayer. These prayers are remembered and prayed for during the celebration and each and every Mass. The Daily Mass Chapel. The entrance to the Reservation Chapel is open from early morning until late at night. The Daily Mass Chapel was designed with the same details and respect as the main worship space. It has a convenient entry and gathering space. It is near the working sacristy so that the vessels needed for the daily celebration of the Eucharist are readily available. During the planning of the town hall meetings, the people of the parish wanted the outside community to see us praying morning, noon, and night. This chapel holds approximately 45 people and is filled most mornings for the celebration of the 6:30 a.m. Mass as people come to pray on their way to work. It is a wonderful space for the celebration of small funerals and weddings. The stations. There is a special story behind our stations. Our diocese is so large that we have two cathedrals. One is St. Agnes here in Springfield, and the other is in St. Mary's in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. The story goes that St. Mary's had a new pastor, and he did not like the old Gothic stations in the old Gothic church, so he had them replaced without asking the people. When the pastor moved on, the beautiful old stations were moved back in, and these stations were removed and on loan to different places. Father Rich Rowland placed small pieces of paper on the base of each station that read, "On loan only." So Father Mike, knowing about these stations and that the parish would not have money for any, asked Father Rich if we might have them. Father Rich went to recover them and was told that they were a gift too. Father Rich asked them to turn the stations over to read the message on the bottom. So Father Mike got the stations back here and we started cleaning them up. They were so covered with mold and dust that when I was cleaning station number 3, I found a tear of blood running down the head from the crown of thorns. I remember running up to the church with the station to see if that was something special happening. Father Mike said no. There were many such things on these stations that could not be seen because of the years of dust. So during Lent, we used to move these stations into church for service, and then after the last station service, we would pick up the stations off their pedestals and walk them back to their home in procession. They are very beautiful, solid pieces of wood and were created in Germany. Thank you for letting us share our story with you.